Hello, everyone. Happy New Year. Happy to be back in front of everybody here on campus. As Dominic mentioned, my name is Robert Tremblay. I'm the Associate Director of Admissions here at the school, as well as a 2010 graduate. And so today what we're going to be giving you all is really an introduction to how we go about doing food here at the college. And we're going to do that through a series that we're going to be launching over the next several weeks, where we're going to be diving into really specifically cooking methods, and more importantly, culinary cooking methods over these immediate weeks. And then further from that, we're actually going to get into some introductory bacon and pastry cooking methods as well. So really kind of stepping it back, taking it to some fundamentals, and really showing you really kind of the foundations of what we do here at the college, as well as how we approach food altogether. So today we're going to be starting off with the dry heat cooking method. And there's two real variations of dry heat cooking. There's a variation where you're not going to use really any fat at all if you're going to be, say, roasting something or grilling it or working with food in that capacity. But then we also have the dry heat cooking methods where you're incorporating fat into the equation, where you're going to be cooking directly with that fat. And that includes things like saute, pan frying, and deep frying. So really, when we look at the elements of working with ingredients that we're going to cook through the dry cooking method, it's really about choosing between those things and choosing the ingredients that are going to work best in those environments. So this week we're going to be focusing on saute. So the dry heat cooking method that we're going to be focusing on is going to be using a little bit of that fat. Next week we're actually going to be diving into more of a roasting or the grilling capacity. So we're going to give you both sides of the coin there and really show you all the different variations of dry heat cooking method. When we talk about saute, we're talking about probably the most versatile form of cooking that's out there. There's so many different ways that you can utilize that cooking technique, whether it's with proteins or vegetables. It's really a very versatile element. But really one of the most important factors with regard to sauteing is using the proper type of equipment. So over here on my right is an actual saute pan, which is actually different than a lot of other pans that you could use. You can sweat in other types of pans and things like that, but that's a variation of sauteing, but it's not the same because you're not using a saute pan and you're not looking to cook things very quickly in a limited amount of fat. So you can see by the shape of it, it's got a lot of surface area to it, so a lot of flat area to get heat directly going into your food, whether it's a protein or a vegetable. But what makes it very unique is sort of the frayed of the sides that you can see here. They kind of like jut out to the side a little bit. They're not straight up horizontal or vertical, I should say. That allows more air and oxygen to get into the pan, allows things to cook faster, gets a lot more heat going into the pan. So that's one of the reasons that we use it for the methods that we do, is because of that introduction of heat, the ability to cook things very quickly and a la minute. So what we're going to be making today is a very classic, simple dish that's really going to elevate and show you the ideas that you can work with regard to the sauteing cooking method. So we're just going to be doing a simple sauteed chicken breast, and then we're going to make a pan sauce with some vegetables that we're going to saute as well, and we're going to do it all in one pan. So you can see the versatility of this type of cooking method and how it directly applies to the proper elements that we're going to include. So one of the most important things is choosing the right type of protein to cook with the saute method. Using a chicken breast is probably the simplest variation that you can use within this, but it's all about using a very tender piece of meat. We don't want something that's going to be tough, have a lot of connective tissue that's going to need a long time to cook. We want something that's going to be tender from the start and very delicate to work with. So when we talk about a chicken breast, it's a pretty neutral flavor, but it is really nice and tender. So it's going to cook perfectly in this capacity, and we're going to add flavors to it through our seasoning of the chicken, as well as the sauce and the vegetables that we cook a little bit later on. That's how we're going to build more flavor into this. As we work through our cooking methods, you're going to see different types of proteins and different types of vegetables and things that we're going to use and in different capacities. But for this, like I said, we're focusing on a nice tender ingredient. So to start off with, for our chicken breast, what we're going to do is we're going to get it seasoned up. It's probably the most important first step to make sure that you've properly seasoned your ingredients. I'm just going to put on some gloves real quick to get that started. We're going to use a combination of salt and pepper, which is a pretty traditional start, but then I've also got a mixture of some other spices and ingredients that I'm going to add to it as well. So some liberal seasoning with the salt and the pepper as well. Okay. But then also in here, I have a mixture of paprika, garlic powder, cayenne pepper, as well as some chili powder in there as well. So some nice extra seasoning to go in here. You can really take all the liberties that you want with seasoning your food in that regard, especially with something that's placid, like a piece of chicken breast. So the more love that you can give it to it in the seasoning process is always going to help and keep things going in the right direction. But with regard to this, you want to make sure that you get a nice even coating with your seasoning, so that's perfectly connected to the protein before we go any further. Okay, so we've got our seasonings into our chicken breast, and now we're going to quickly transition over to dredging it in some AP flour. So some just simple all-purpose flour. Now this is a step that is definitely optional if you would rather just go straight into the pan with it. I prefer to have the flour because what it does is it gives you a nice crispy crust on the outside of your protein. It really gives a nice even coating, allows for that caramelization and that browning, really takes it to a nice level. So like I said before, this part is optional, but you want to be very mindful of the amount of flour that you get onto your protein. You want to make sure that all that excess flour gets broken away, so that way you don't end up with little bits of flour cooking in the pan and burning to the bottom of the pan. So very important to lightly dredge the chicken before getting it into the pan. Going to quickly clean up our station here. I'm just going to sanitize our cutting board here. Very important part of the process is to work cleanly throughout everything. Something that we learned very early on here at CIA is not only how to do our own dishes and things like that, but more importantly, how to work safely in the kitchens at all times, making sure that we keep everything up to code and making sure that we're keeping our customers safe. So what I'm gonna do next is get our pan ready to go. So we're gonna start off by cooking our chicken breast. We're going to cook it to about 165 degrees, which is the serve safe temp, as you all are very familiar with, I'm sure, that are watching, keeping the food safe. But most importantly is we want to cook this quickly, and we want to generate some color on the bottom of our pan. We want to generate some fond. So in addition to cooking the chicken itself, we're going to utilize this pan to build flavor into the rest of the components that we're going to get going. So we want to make sure that our pan is nice and scorching hot, so we get that nice initial sear onto our chicken breast and start to develop that color, and then we'll kind of take it from there. So going to get a little bit of vegetable oil here into our pan, just enough to coat the bottom of the pan. We don't want to get too much. We want to be very mindful of the amount of fat that we're working with, because if we put too much, then we're not going to be doing a saute anymore. We'd be simply doing either a pan fry, or if you go way overboard, doing a deep fry. So it's all about just having enough to coat that bottom of the pan, just so that it's glistening and you start to see that shine. We just want enough of a buffer to be able to cook our protein evenly. So I'm gonna go ahead and get our chicken into our pan, okay? And this is a very important step in the process, is you want to make sure that when you add it into the pan, you want to make sure that you add it away from yourself. So that way, if there is a little bit of excess oil that splashes, it splashes away from you and not up onto your hands. So we're going to get our chicken into our pan here. Okay, and you want to make sure that you press it down evenly, so that way you're getting as much contact with the protein to the pan, so that way it can cook and do its thing. Okay, get this back into our sanitation bucket. Going to clear off our station. So you can see as this is starting to work, as it's starting to cook, it's going to caramelize the flour, that dredging that we put, and that seasoning. It's going to bring some nice caramelization to the chicken itself, and that fond that's going to develop on the bottom of the pan is going to be the key to our next step when we start to incorporate vegetables into it. In this instance, when I was talking about the versatility of the saute method, you could do a number of different ingredients in this type of cooking method, whether it's with a simple protein like a chicken breast, or you could do simple fillets, like beef fillet steaks, steak tenderloin, any type of pork tenderloin you can do in it, some pork chops, things like that. Any type of tender protein that you can cook quickly is going to work really well in this. An option, if you were going to be talking about like using like a brisket or stew meat or something like that, that's a process where you'd want to incorporate a little bit of moisture, so that way you have some longevity to slow cook those ingredients. When we're working with something like this, it's going to cook much quicker, so you have that flexibility with it. So going to monitor our heat. Going to let it go a little bit. One of the important things to keep in mind with this is when you get your food into the pan, You don't want to move it around. You want to let that cooking process happen. So as those sugars in the flour start to caramelize and brown, they're actually going to start to release, and that's when you're going to be able to flip it over. If you try to do it too soon, you're going to have those little brown bits break off of your chicken. You're not going to have an even browning, and then you're going to have little fond bits on the bottom of the pan that are actually going to start to burn. So very important to manage your heat as well as to let the pan do its job. So I'm going to give it a quick look here. And this is a fairly thin piece of chicken, so it's going to cook rather quickly. Just going to let it go a little bit while longer. Really, from an eyeball perspective, once you start to see the coloration on the chicken start to come up a little, about halfway or 3/4 of the way, that's how you know that you've got to cook properly on that first side. That first side of chicken breast is always going to take longer than the second because it's going to get up to temperature a lot faster. Since we had a cold piece of chicken breast going into our pan, it takes a little while longer for it to get up to temp and get that caramelization. So starting to come nicely. I can definitely hear the sound. I'm going to flip it over here. You can see we've got that nice browning going on, that nice caramelization and even color. Very important, like I said, once you get it into the pan, to press it down evenly, you get that nice even coloration on your chicken. So I'm going to cover this with a lid so we can get some steam going into there, so it's going to cook a little bit faster for us, just in the presence of saving time. Okay, so put that back in the sanding liquid. And now we're going to transition quickly to the next phase of what we're going to be working with. So in addition to the chicken breast, we're going to accompany it with some sauteed mushrooms, some fresh shallot, as well as some fresh spinach. So like I was saying before, this isn't just a cooking technique to utilize for protein. We saute vegetables just as much as we work with sauteing proteins. It also is an option for reheating ingredients. So if you've ever like par-cooked carrots or green beans, any type of green vegetable, a lot of time in restaurants, a saute station is going to have par-cooked ingredients that they use to saute quickly so that they can get up to temp, finish them with some seasonings, and work with their ingredients that way. So it's a very efficient cooking method for working in the industry. And I'm not gonna lie, it's probably the most intense station in most restaurants outside of Italian restaurants where usually it's gonna be the pasta station. But in this atmosphere, very important to be on your toes and work very quickly. So a lot more chaos usually when you're working the line on a busy Friday night on the saute station than we have going today. But I'm gonna start to work in some of these other ingredients in just a minute or so. Okay, so chicken's looking great. I'm gonna give it a quick look here. Perfect. I'm gonna test our temperature here. And we're almost there. Need a little bit more time. I'm going to turn down our heat just a little bit, and then I'm going to put it right back on the lid and let it finish. Perfect. So for the vegetables that we're going to be working with, as I mentioned, we're going to be using some fresh mushrooms. So here I've got a nice simple cremini mushroom, which is also known as a baby portobello. One of the fun facts about this type of mushroom is the fact that in the grocery store, when you go there and you see kind of the plethora of different options that are there, more commonly than not, you're going to see a couple of variations of a mushroom that's this size. You're going to see the white button cap mushrooms, which are actually the same varietal of mushrooms as this one. It's just that white mushroom has grown and aged a little bit while longer. So those white button mushrooms will actually turn into a cremini mushroom. And then if you let this continue to grow further, it actually develop into an adult size, which is the portobello mushroom. So that's why they call these the baby bellas, when in fact it's all really the same mushroom. It's just a matter of the development process. So one key mistake that a lot of young cooks will make and a lot of cooks will make is the way that they actually go about cleaning these. And they'll actually like dump them into a bucket of water or rinse them off in the sink. That's not what you want to do. You want to be very mindful of the moisture that you're adding to your mushrooms. They're really like sponges, so you want to be very mindful. Use just a damp cloth if you can, a damp paper towel to wipe off some of that excess dirt instead of trying to rinse them off. Otherwise, they're going to soak everything up. Okay, so our chicken is looking perfect. I'm going to turn off our heat here. Beautiful. I'm going to set this over to the side, let it rest. Now we're going to jump into the next phase. So like I said, we're going to do a quick saute on some vegetables here. We've already got our mushrooms prepped and ready to go. I'm going to mince up our shallot here really quickly. So a shallot is really just a fancy variation of a red onion. One of my first chefs here actually referred to it as a pretentious onion, which I always like reciting in my adult years here. It's really a great ingredient, packs a lot of punch and not a very large vegetable. So what we're going to do is we're just going to mince this up really quickly. Like I said, a little bit will go a long way, so we're just going to run through this a little bit more. The less times you run your knife through cutting vegetables like this, the better, because you break down less of the cell walls. It doesn't cause them to open up as much, saves a lot more of the aroma and that aromatic quality for when we get it into the pan. So we've got our shallots minced up nicely here. Get those into our portion cup. And now I'm going to quickly get some butter into our pan. So you can see here, we've got some nice coloration on the bottom of our pan here. All that beautiful fond that we've got going. Going to turn up the heat here a little bit. We're going to get our mushrooms into our pan here, along with the shallots. Okay. Gonna add a little bit of salt and pepper here. I'm also gonna add a little bit of our little concoction here. We want a little bit of connective tissue between the protein and our veggies that are gonna go along with it, but just a little bit there. Perfect. I'm just going to put this down. So we just wanna sweat these. We're not looking to really caramelize them. We've got that fond and that caramelization left over from the chicken breast that we did. So these veggies, we just want to cook them down real quick. I'm going to turn up our heat all the way. It's already starting to smell amazing in here. So these are really going to kind of serve as our aromatics for this dish. I'm also going to add a little bit of garlic here. So this is going to be the base for the flavors for our vegetables. So we're also going to add a little bit of spinach in there, build our sauce flavors from here. So it's really all about piling on top and building things quickly. Okay. So these are cooking down really nicely. Only takes about 30 seconds or so for that garlic to start perfuming out of the pan. Really starting to come together nicely. Beautiful. All right. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to add in our spinach. Perfect. Fresh spinach. Add a little bit of salt to that. A little bit of pepper. I'm going to wilt this down a little bit. You can see how quickly these ingredients come together for us. One of the best parts about sauté is, like I said, it's kind of a crazy station when you're working in a restaurant, but it's all about that speed and efficiency. So mise en place is a big part of the success. Prepping out your station ahead of time is really a big characteristic of the success. So veggies are coming down really nicely. This is going to be a beautiful bed of vegetables for our chicken to sit on. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to deglaze our pan with a little bit of white wine here. Perfect. And it smells so good. There are a few things in this world better than the combination of mushrooms, shallots, butter, and a little bit of white wine. And then you've got the fresh spinach on top of it, which is perfect. And reduce that down, and now we're going to add a little bit of chicken stock here. Not too much. Just enough so that we have a little bit of the sauce to sit on the bottom of our plate to accompany our chicken breast. Okay? I'm going to give this a quick taste to see how our seasoning is. Just there, a little bit more salt. A bit more pepper. Starting to smell really, really good in here. So we want to reduce this down a little bit more. I'm going to add in some fresh butter. So if you've ever working in your kitchens, in your classrooms or at home, Anytime that you look to finish a sauce or a dish with butter, we refer to that as Montego burr. So it's really just adding some fresh, whole unsalted butter to your dish to give it some velvetyness, some creaminess, and it really helps kind of thicken it up, give some nice viscosity to your dish. Okay. So once that comes down, we will be good to go. I'm going to start our plating. Perfect. Kill our heat here. I'm going to give it one final taste. Perfect. Absolutely delicious. This simple combination, you can change up all these things if you want to, different aromatics, different vegetables if you want to, but this is really as good as it gets in terms of a simple pan sauce. The combination of the chicken fond as well as the wine and that fresh chicken stock and all those ingredients, they really come together really quickly and really nicely. So we're gonna get our plate ready here. Okay. So what we're gonna do is we're going to take our spinach and our mushrooms and our shallot, and we're gonna build a nice little base here. Okay. A nice little base for our sauce and our chicken to sit. So we're gonna make a little bit of love down there. Beautiful. A bit more. Take our chicken breast. So lay that right on top. Veggies. I'm gonna give a quick wipe to a plate. And finish it with some fresh chive right on top. And there you have it. Simple sauteed chicken breast with sauteed mushrooms and fresh spinach. Enjoy.